Claire Randall stood quietly in the Scottish Highlands, the wind brushing her hair, her thoughts miles away from the husband waiting back at their inn. Frank was kind, patient, but distant, lost in his books and the ghosts of ancestors long buried. Their marriage had survived the war, but not unchanged. Claire felt like a stranger beside him, their conversations shallow, their touches mechanical. This trip was meant to bring them closer, but each day only deepened the silence between them. She missed the man he used to be. Or maybe she missed the woman she used to be. Drawn by a strange pull, Claire visited Cray Na Dun alone, the circle of ancient stones whispering promises she didn't understand. She placed her hand on one, and the world tilted. Sound vanished. Light collapsed. When she opened her eyes, the air was sharper, the sky unfamiliar. The terrain looked the same, but something was wrong. She saw soldiers, redcoats. Real, not reenactors. Gunfire cracked the silence, and Claire ran. Branches tore at her clothes as she stumbled through the woods, heart racing in a panic she couldn't explain. Captured by Highlanders, she was dragged to a stone house where men spoke in thick Gaelic and suspicious glances. Her clothes were strange, her accent off, and her explanation made no sense. But when one of them, a tall, red-haired man, cried out in pain, Claire's instincts took over. She knelt beside him, noting the bullet wound in his shoulder. Her hands moved with practiced ease, cleaning, dressing, calming. They watched her with awe, uncertain if she was a witch or a healer. The man's name was Jamie Fraser. Young, strong, wounded, but polite in a way that felt almost out of time. He thanked her, called her Sassenach, and didn't let his eyes linger too long. That night, Claire lay in a rough bed, listening to voices through the walls, her mind racing. She didn't understand what had happened, but she wasn't dreaming. And despite the fear, a strange, dangerous part of her felt alive. More than she had in years. In the days that followed, Claire was kept under watch but treated well. She was expected to earn her place, so she helped where she could, tending wounds, gathering herbs. Jamie often sought her company, not in a forward way, but with quiet curiosity, asking questions about her home, accepting her evasive answers. She began to look for him too, listening for his voice, remembering the way his eyes softened when he smiled. She shouldn't have. She was married. But the loneliness of her old life clung to her even here. Each time she thought of Frank, guilt pricked at her, but the memories felt blurry, distant. Here, everything was sharp. The cold, the danger, the pull in her chest every time Jamie entered a room. She didn't know if she'd fallen back in time or forward into a story not her own. But one thing was clear, something had begun, and it would not be undone. Jamie's presence became a constant in Claire's days. He asked nothing of her, yet offered her quiet companionship, protection, and a kind of attention she hadn't realized she was starving for. He watched her, not with possession, but with respect, like he saw her for who she was, not just what she could do. Claire tried to keep her distance. She reminded herself that she didn't belong here, that Frank was waiting, that this was temporary. But Jamie's warmth chipped away at every excuse she clung to. He spoke of his home, his family, the pain of loss, and the burden of duty. He never pushed, yet with each conversation, Claire found herself giving more. He listened when she talked, really listened, and when she didn't have the words, he sat in silence beside her as though that, too, was a form of understanding. It had been years since someone made her feel so seen, so effortlessly. One night, Jamie was brought in again, blood on his side from a skirmish with redcoats. Claire's hands shook as she treated him. This wasn't just another patient. This wasn't detachment. This was fear for him. Something had shifted, and she could no longer lie to herself about it. Jamie, too, had changed. He no longer looked at her with curiosity, there was longing there now, carefully restrained, as though he feared frightening her away. He didn't have to say anything. She already knew. He told her stories to distract her from the fear, made her laugh even as she stitched his skin. When he caught her hand in his, she didn't pull away. That night, he told her, simply, that he wanted her to be his wife. Not for convenience, not for clan politics, but because he cared. It was sudden, irrational, but it didn't feel like a proposal. It felt like a confession of truth too heavy to carry in silence any longer. Claire didn't answer. She couldn't. But her heart was loud in her chest. She thought of Frank, how he used to touch her only out of habit. How he asked about her day but never noticed when she didn't answer. How their love had dulled under the weight of time and war. Jamie's love was new, yes, but it was sharp and alive. It made her feel like the woman she had forgotten she could be. Days later, the choice was made for her. To protect her from the law, the clan insisted Claire marry Jamie. She could have refused, but she didn't. She told herself it was for survival, but her eyes betrayed her when they met Jamie's. The vows were simple, the moment quiet, but something real passed between them. When he touched her, there was reverence. When he kissed her, it was with both fear and promise. Claire lay awake that night, his arms around her, heart full and breaking at once. She was no longer just a nurse from 1945. She was someone else now, bound to two men, in two different worlds, already lost in a love that could never be simple. Claire woke with a sense of quiet dread. The weight of what she had done settled deeper each day. Her body was here, her heart torn between two lives. She told herself this marriage was circumstance, that it didn't erase her vows to Frank. But the truth was, each moment with Jamie pulled her further away from the man she had once loved. She barely thought of Frank now, except in flickers of guilt that arrived late and left quickly. Jamie had become the rhythm of her days, the warmth in her nights, the reason she smiled without realizing. She hadn't told Jamie the full truth. He knew she was different, that her knowledge of medicine and herbs went beyond what should have been possible. He suspected more, but he never pressed. He accepted her as she was, never demanding, never doubting. That made it harder. The more he trusted her, the more she felt she was betraying him too. Lies of omission, quiet betrayals, born not of cruelty but of survival. She was lying to both men now, one by loving him too soon, the other by not loving him anymore. The moment she discovered the stones still worked, everything shifted. She stood there, heart pounding, realizing she could return to her own time. Go back to the world she came from. Go back to Frank. She should have run toward it. Instead, she hesitated. She thought of Jamie's voice in the dark, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. She thought of the way her name sounded on his lips, like something sacred. And she froze. Jamie found her there, standing before the stones. He didn't ask why. He just looked at her, like he already knew. She tried to explain, tried to tell him the truth, but the words faltered. He didn't press. He only said that if she needed to go, she should. That he would never hold her back from the life she wanted. That his love was not a prison. That broke her more than anger ever could have. Claire returned with him, but the silence between them was different now. She felt exposed, vulnerable, torn in ways she couldn't explain. Jamie never asked her to choose. He just kept loving her, quietly, without conditions. That love made the guilt worse. She was betraying Jamie with the past, betraying Frank with the present, and betraying herself with the lie that she could belong to both. She started having dreams of Frank, alone and waiting. Of Jamie, bleeding in her arms. She woke up crying, unable to tell who she was mourning. Love had become a cruel trick of time. The more she gave her heart to Jamie, the more she stole from Frank's memory. And yet, she couldn't stop. Claire was no longer a woman of one time, one man, or one truth. She was the consequence of choices no one should ever have to make. Claire crossed back through the stones with a heart splintered by love and guilt. She found Frank waiting, older and harder around the edges, his eyes darker than she remembered. The man who had once searched for her with desperation now stood still, arms crossed, not with relief but resignation. She told him everything. About the stones, the war-torn Highlands, the marriage to Jamie. About how it wasn't just survival, it was love. She didn't dress it up, didn't soften the truth. Frank listened in silence, expression unreadable. He didn't accuse her. That would have been easier. Instead, he asked her one question: would she have returned if the stones hadn't worked? Claire couldn't lie. No. She wouldn't have. And with that, something between them died without ceremony. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked away for a moment, as if needing space to accept that the woman he had waited for wasn't his anymore. The days that followed were filled with distance. They moved through the same rooms, slept in the same house, but the space between them was unbridgeable. Claire tried to reconnect, tried to find the thread that had once bound them, but it was gone. She looked at Frank and saw kindness, patience, familiarity. But not love. Not anymore. Her heart had rewritten itself in another century. Eventually, Frank offered her a life. A quiet one. No questions, no demands. They could raise a child if there was one. He said he would do his duty, but he didn't ask if she would be happy. He already knew. Claire accepted, not out of desire, but obligation. It felt like penance. Every day she lived in the 20th century, she felt further away from herself. The memories of Jamie weren't fading, they were haunting her. The sound of his voice, the feel of his touch, the way he had looked at her like she was his whole world. Nothing in this time compared. One morning, she returned to the stones alone. She didn't expect them to work, but hope doesn't need logic. She touched the stone. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. She screamed, cried, begged. But the passage was closed. She had made her choice too late, and now she was trapped in the wrong time with the wrong man and a heart that would never fully return to her. She went home that night and said nothing. Frank didn't ask. He already knew. They lived like shadows after that, respectful, polite, but hollow. Claire raised her daughter with stories of Scottish hills and quiet heroes. Stories she never claimed as her own, but always told with a touch of longing. Years passed, and the pain didn't leave, it just settled into something familiar. Claire had betrayed one man with her heart, and another with her silence. And in the end, the one she had truly betrayed was herself, for thinking she could live in one time while belonging to another.